Hello, welcome to the first episode of our podcast. And today we're going to talk about how to be single in times of Corona. Because these social distancing rules are really challenging for all of us. But in terms of sexuality, when you're living together with a partner in a stable relationship, you're more or less okay. But when you're single and dating, then these distancing rules can be limiting your sexual behavior and sexual experiences. So we want to talk about this, how we can sort of find this balance between protecting our physical health, protecting against COVID, but at the same time also ensuring our sexual health. And we have two guests again who are with who you're going to talk today. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Berkant. I'm 22 years old. I'm doing my master's in legal psychology here in Maastricht. And I'm looking forward for the discussion. It's a really interesting topic and also affecting a lot of people, including me, obviously why I'm here. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi everyone, my name is Beatriz. I'm 23 years old. I'm studying psychology. I'm actually in my third year, still doing the bachelor's, but I'm writing my thesis on school-based sex education, and I'm challenging the heteronormativity of it a little bit in my paper. So I'm super excited to be here with you all.
Okay, great. So let's start talking about it. I think first of all, we should reflect on this idea that, we have the 1.5 meter distancing rules, which have implications for our sexual behavior because you can have sex with your bubble, your own bubble, meaning the partner with who you live together in one household, but you cannot have sex with anyone anymore. So if you're single, if you're dating, that can have implications. So I was wondering, because there is some criticism now that this is actually quite starting from a conservative perspective, this rule. It's like we think about sex in the sense like if you're like in a classic family of cohabiting partners living together with just one partner, then it's okay. But for all the rest, like dating, singles, long distance relationships, open relationships, polyamorous relationships, this kind of a discrimination, isn't it? I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I totally understand the viewpoint. Especially because it's not just a thing of 2 months. It's been more than a year at this point, because in the beginning I was actually following the rules. I didn't see a single person, including friends, honestly. I was just at home.
Yeah.
But after a while, obviously you get lonely, not just regarding like seeing people in general, also regarding dating. So you try to find something more serious, but you can't just find a significant other by snipping your hands. So you need to find your ways around it. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point what you're saying. I also think that the government had this idea, okay, we have to protect against COVID and we installed these rules, but nobody thought that this would be for so long.
Exactly.
So you could indeed say to people like, hey, you can masturbate, you can do all these different things and you don't have sex with anyone else if you're single. You can do this for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, but now it's more than a year. You cannot simply expect, I would assume, to ask people not to have sex with a partner during 1 year.
Also, it's not just about sex, it's about intimacy in general. I mean, at one
Human
point
connection.
you miss being close to someone in any way.
Yeah, and getting to know new people and things like that. I actually did pay attention to some of the rules that they put forward, but what are those rules actually? Like, can you?
Yeah, well, the thing is, they say just you can have sex with the partner with who you are in the same household. If you're not, then the basic rule is that the COVID cannot be transferred via genital contact or via genital and anal contact, but it will be transferred via saliva. So that means kissing and touching. But that makes it difficult because in a sexual situation, there's a lot of touching and kissing, obviously. So you're not allowed to do that. So you cannot have oral sex, you cannot kiss. And that's a little bit a problem. And it's also because touching and kissing has a lot of beneficial effects. I mean, it reduces our stress level. It increases oxytocin, which means that you have this social bonding effect. And especially in these distressing times, we have this extra need for touch to reduce our distress level. So it's kind of a paradox. So that's challenging. So not touching each other. So what can you do? You can masturbate, or you can even masturbate together if you're in the same room, but at least keep distance then of 1.5 meters or via online facilities. I don't know if you have any experience with that or know that people are doing this.
Well, definitely there has to be a middle term. Everyone can take into consideration these measures and wash your hands and get to know the person better before just meeting up to have a sexual interaction. But for me, it seems a bit wild to expect people to just stop altogether these sexual interactions and just rely on watching someone else touching themselves or just sexting. So, for example, in my case, I really made sure that the person, for example, was not seeing a lot of people as well. For myself, I quarantined for 2 weeks before even engaging in any sexual interaction. But yeah, when I did, I always made sure that it wasn't just someone out of the blue. I
Yeah.
maintained a certain contact with that person, and yeah, made sure that there was some component of trust, which is very important in any sexual interaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also, now that you're saying it, I saw a trend within at least me and my friends. Because in the beginning, most people didn't see anyone. I feel like most people even deleted their dating apps, etc. And then with time, people downloaded the dating app, started to just text with the people. And then after a while, it was like, okay, I want to get to know the person before I meet with them. And I feel like now everyone is at a point where they're like, okay, I don't care anymore. I will just meet.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see this develop within
Yeah,
Even on
everyone.
Instagram, you see like these memes now, like, oh, I should have found a sex buddy before COVID, you know, like now
Yeah.
I'm all by myself. Yeah, definitely, I saw that trend. Like, I also had it. Like, I deleted in the beginning, but then I was like, you know what? We need this. This is wild. They cannot do this
Yeah.
to us, you know?
But it's interesting that you mentioned this idea of a sex buddy, because in the beginning, when the rules were set, it was actually indicated that you could have a sex buddy. It was really an official
Oh.
recommendation. Like, if you're single, you can have a sex buddy, because they thought, yeah, obviously, you can say masturbation, but masturbation serves different functions than having sex with a
Yeah.
partner. But then again, from a quite conservative perspective, people started to protest, because they say, like, if you put it in the regulations, then it feels as if you sort of encourage and promote the idea of a sex buddy. So they removed it again. And that's a little bit the thing. I think it's a good idea, because what I hear from you is it's about being pragmatic. It's about, okay, there are these rules, and you can say masturbate, and you can say, okay, you can use virtual sex and sexting. We can talk about that as well, but it's
Yeah.
of course there are some risks involved there. But it can never replace the idea of having sex together with somebody. So I understand that aspect, that you try to find a way to be pragmatic. I hear you say, like, okay, maybe a sex buddy, somebody that you can trust, somebody that you know limits his or her own social contact.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the less people you have sex with, the less risk there is of contamination and infection. And I think that's also something we need to be careful with, that on the one hand, we want to sort of promote sexual health and make sure that you can sort of develop your sexuality, but at the same time, we have to still protect our collective health also. It's about this paradox between individual health needs and collective health needs. And
I think the situation you're in also matters a lot, because even before Corona, you always had the risk of having STDs, for example,
Yeah.
which also, like, the probability of them, like, getting them, like, raised with
Yeah.
the more partners you had. For example, if I'm visiting my parents next week, I won't see anyone.
Yeah.
Or, like, if I'm living with my parents, or I have grandparents I see once in a while, or old people, whatever. But if you're just living by yourself, I feel like it's your own responsibility. And if you take the risk, you take it. Obviously, you should still be careful. But I think it's really individual for everyone in that sense.
But do you feel that young people are less scared about the virus? That they feel like, if I have it, I won't be that sick, so it's okay? It's more about protecting the older people, the vulnerable people, and not really about protecting themselves?
So I only have my own standpoint and, like, can tell what I saw. What I saw was that in the beginning, everyone was scared, including me. Like, we all, because we didn't know what it is.
You didn't know what
obviously.
to expect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I feel like after a while, it shifted towards okay, as long as I'm not with older people, it's not that I don't like, or people don't care. It's more like I will be less careful. And I heard several people saying at this point that they say, okay, I just don't care, which is obviously wrong too. I mean, we should care. It's still, we're all in this together. It's collective. But I definitely saw that people are less.
Yeah.
scared now.
What I also hear is that you were talking about STIs and HIV prevention. And that's also something that I'm worried about, because in terms of sexuality, there's a lot of what we cannot do. Be careful, because you can get sick and it can hurt, and you have to protect yourself. And now there's like this extra level of protection. It's not only protecting yourself against STI, it's now also protecting against COVID. So there's a lot of negative messages around
that's very
sexuality.
true.
I'm just wondering how this will affect the way you think, reflect on. I mean, when you're young, this is the period in which you discover your sexuality.
Definitely. We actually do see this trend in mental health, where there's a peak in depression, there's a peak in anxiety, especially among like our age group. And what I believe is that once this pandemic is over, there will be like this surge of STIs and like sexual transmittable diseases, because people will engage in more reckless behavior, maybe unprotected sex. It's kind of like this rebound effect, you know, like
we don't know. It can go different ways. We can also be
Indeed.
that people will become anxious, overthinking, and restricted.
But sex is not only limited to bedrooms. Like, we know that there is some certain clubs who are very open about that happening, and in those clubs, unfortunately, there's a high rate of sexual transmittable diseases sometimes.
Exactly.
Once clubs are open, and those sort of clubs are also open, I'm pretty sure we'll see, like, I feel like we'll see this surge of
So we will have to sort of invest more in prevention again, and because that's why I'm also wondering now. We are really about protecting the COVID, but are we still thinking about STIs and HIV? Are people still using condoms, and is that still there?
So just first of all, regarding the clubs, I always had the view that once Corona is over, I feel like people will be a bit more careful with going to the clubs, because I heard people saying, I can't imagine being in a crowd anymore, or like going to concerts immediately at least. So I don't know, honestly, if people would go to the club and make out with the next best person. But then again, obviously it's different once they open. So I feel like
it
it's
will
a
take
guessing
some
game.
time. It will take some time, because I also feel that people will be scared. I also myself, I cannot imagine that I would go to a bar in a cafe and that I would stand together with so many people. I cannot
like bumping
imagine.
into people, it's such a weird concept.
But at the same time, I think we will get used to the normal life again soon. But just to come back to this HIV prevention and all these things, because I think that's also something that we now, people don't talk about anymore. When we talk about sex in Corona times, it's also about protecting against COVID. But there's still, of course, the STIs and the HIV and the PrEP use and all this. So how do you think this is evolving now?
To be really honest, I think this kind of education always fell short anyways. I mean, until I really researched myself, I didn't know anything about STIs. In school, we learned about AIDS. That's it. For me, this was the only existing threat. And only after actually like experiencing like sexual relations for myself, I realized, no, there's way more you need to be careful of. But I mean, of course, there are cures for all of them. But still, it would be good to know about them.
I think that sex education really needs to focus on it also depends on which country you live in, because of course, if you grow up here in Belgium and the Netherlands, our sex education is quite good. But the problem is with our current sex education that it's really about STIs and be careful on all but it's too little on the positive and sexual pleasure and how you can masturbate and how you can have a nice bonding with somebody. I think we should invest more in that as well. But indeed, I think that it's also, this period is challenging in terms of also how we can sort of, it changes a lot in terms of sexual development. It has a lot of implications for young people. So I think we should adapt our sex and relationship education based on what we are experiencing now, and to sort of learn from this period to see what people actually need. Because, for example, one of the advices is learn masturbate, but there's so many people who don't really know how to masturbate, and we're going to invest a podcast also on that, because I think it's a very important topic, and I think this is a good period to learn to masturbate better, to learn your body better, so to please yourself, but it can also ameliorate the sex with your partner. So I think it has a double function.
Definitely.
True.
But so I think masturbation is one thing that we should sort of invest more, and that we can use this period to create more awareness on the importance of masturbation. Are there other things that you think that people will learn from this period in terms of sexuality?
Learning, I don't know, but the thing that I was thinking about when you were mentioning that the sexual development of younger people, it's just the importance of our school-based sex education. We have to reevaluate entirely the themes that are being targeted. Of course, STI prevention is important, but they have also to be more open to, for example, other sexualities, other people that identify differently, or people who don't want to have sex, because there also exist people who have no interest whatsoever in that. Yet school-based sex education is very conservative, as we've seen. United States, we can't even talk about that. Abstinence all over the place. So I think we have to reevaluate how we talk and how we perceive sexual interactions, because it's entirely normal, and yet we see people who are extremely uncomfortable, not only when they're having sexual interactions, but also when they're talking about it.
Exactly.
So we have to, I think, in the end, we have to start from the root and do an entire reevaluation. But
I think that this more conservative perspective on how we deal with sexuality in times of corona is not really helping, because we want to create openness, and we want to sort of create like on sexuality. And now it seems that the general health, physical health, once again, is more important than your mental health and sexual health. It seems that, of course, we need to be sane, and it's our physical health is important. But at the same time, I think it's important to recognize and raise awareness about the fact that sexuality is an important part of our life, is an important part of our quality of life. So we need to invest in that and see, if you're single in times of corona, how can you still have a worthwhile sexual development? And especially when you're younger, when you're in the midst of your sexual development, it's so important.
I'm actually sorry for these people who just like moved to their own places to start studying this year or last year, who just turned 18 and who were waiting for it, whose development just stopped midway for them. Because that's what I heard too. Like, that people were like, this was like my year I wanted to like experience, but they obviously couldn't. And now they're even more scared. What I'm afraid of, that these people won't ever get to develop into the sexual being they ought to be.
That's one interesting thing, that as sexologists we also are wondering what is going to be the long-term consequences, because as we said, like, okay, 1 month or 2 months of this abstinence, that's what we thought it would be, but now it's like more than a year. It's going to be like maybe 2 years that people lose in their sexual development. And if we think about sexual development in young people, especially when you think about adolescents, there's kind of this stepwise sexual interaction career. It starts with kissing, then deep kissing, then it's touching above the clothes, beyond the clothes, oral sex, penetration. We all know the steps. And it takes about 2-3 years, this interaction career between the first kiss and the first intercourse. But now imagine that you're sort of at the start of, in the midst of this interaction career, and then suddenly it stops. You cannot see anyone anymore. So what will the effect be if suddenly we can have sex again? Will people postpone this sexual interaction? Will they just postpone it, or will they just skip it? Will they just more rapidly engage in sexual activities and then engage in... I'm wondering. I don't know whether we can sort of speculate about it.
I wonder too, when I see like younger people like in their 14s, 15s, I see this big trend of young people just starting to date through the phone, Snapchat, sending pictures of their bodies without actually going through those steps you just mentioned, which I think are extremely important for your sexual development. It's like also establishing boundaries, right? Like with those steps, and completely overlooking them. And like I'm not, of course, saying that it's bad to send pictures of your body. You do what you want with your body, but it's important to know that there are risks that can, that you can carry throughout your life afterwards. So I also wonder, and I have a little sister, so I'm also like worried, how's it gonna be for them,
It's a really hard question actually, on how it will affect them, because on one hand, of course, they didn't experience it, and now we can't tell really, like, will they engage in more reckless behavior? I mean, they're also in puberty, so they don't think that much. Or like they think, but they are more prone for risky behavior. But then at the same time, maybe they are scared off of it. Maybe they will develop some sexual inabilities. You never know.
We don't know. It could indeed be inhibition, like analytic overthinking, being anxious, because you sort of skip that development, so suddenly it's there. Or you could be that they become promiscuous, like you said in the beginning, also that people just say, like, also there could be a lot of pressure, like now we are allowed to have sex, now we must have sex. And so that it becomes sort of, it's about going too fast is not a good idea, because then you cross your boundaries and you can have regret. And you really need this experimentation phase to learn to know yourself, to learn what do I want, what do I don't want, what are my boundaries, what is yes and what is no. It's about discovering your sexual identity, but going too slow is also not a good idea, because you need to sort of step out and just expose yourself and just try out new things to learn yourself. So I probably we cannot generalize, and probably people will react differently. There will be people who will be restricted, and there will be people who will be more disinhibited, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And also a thing that I noticed in like in this talk with the boundaries and like developing your sexuality in a healthy way is that in this asking for nudes and digital sex, like I at least noticed that it's mostly boys, guys in the middle of puberty who kind of ask girls for these pictures. And whenever I talk to like younger girls and everything, because of my little sister and her friends, I noticed that they don't really know what to respond. They don't dare to say no. And that's the importance really of establishing your boundaries when you're younger. They think it's entirely normal for a guy to say, send me a picture of your breast and I'll send it to you.
Exactly. And that's also about the risk of having less social contact, because then there are less opportunities to discuss this with friends. And because a lot of what we see is that people learn from each other, learn from their peers. And if you see each other, you can talk about it, but it's less easy to talk about these topics via Zoom or via WhatsApp and so on. So people have these experiences and are put for the sexual challenges, don't know what to do, and they just indeed do it across their boundaries. I think that's a risk. And
Now that you're saying regarding the missing social contact, it can also happen that it becomes more of a taboo topic, because they just experience it digitally for a long time and like through distance, and it's just in our sheets, in our bed, or like on Snapchat or whatever. That once everything is back to normal one day, that it will still be restricted to these areas of life only.
Exactly. That we didn't really in real life learn to talk face to face about sexuality, which is completely different than hiding beyond the screen. And it's true. I think also when we talk about this online and sexting, because we discussed it, that's also one of the advices that how can you be single in times of Corona. It's okay, you can masturbate, and then it's also, well, you can use sexting and virtual sex and remote sex toys and sex from a distance. And it's also, I'm also wondering, giving this advice without any background can also be, risky, because as you said, there are some risks involved. If you do sexting, I think what is really important also that you be careful not to do this with people that you don't know. I mean, don't send sex to somebody that you don't know offline. I mean, it's really important that you can trust the other person, because otherwise we know that people's life can get ruined by this spreading of pictures. And it's about not putting your head on it, no recognizable background. These basic ideas, I think we should invest more in sex education, but also not only in sex education, I think also when we give these advices to singles, that we need to give the full advice and not simply say, well, use sexting and use virtual sex and you're okay, you're protected for COVID. Yes, but you're not protected against all the other risks involved.
Also, the problem is if they say it like this, you sit there and think, no shit, Sherlock. Like, obviously, what's there left? If I can't have physical contact, like, of course I will masturbate, but at one point you'll not be satisfied by it, especially if you don't know different ways of doing it or finding out how you actually enjoy it.
I feel like there's this idea that, sex is there, and in case you want to do sex, here are the measures. But I feel like, we should understand that sex is there and people want and will have sex if they want to. There's many ways to have it. Sexual pleasure, you call it, it will happen. So based on this, what advice can you give us? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like, it's not, sex is there and it might happen at one point. It will happen. It's happened 24/7. We're sexual beings.
What do you think about the idea of sort of enlarging broadening our definition about sex? It's not only about penetration and genital contact. You can also create sexual connection via giving a massage, dirty talk, sending each other erotic stories and fantasy sharing, or giving each other erotic assignments. With that, I mean, then there is no physical contact, and you sort of turn each other on via fantasy, via words, could that work?
For a while, but not for a year. At
Yeah.
least not for me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to just switch it up a bit,
Mhm.
but I don't think it's a long-term solution.
Yeah.
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 Also, like when we say this, sex is penetration, it's just like it's clearly putting it out there, this heteronormative, like
Yeah,
sexual
again.
relationship.
Yeah.
For example, sex between women, lesbian sex is known for being so much sweeter, just like touching, kissing, being there for each other. That's a sexual practice for many women. It's not just about the penetration. We don't
Yeah.
need that all the time. Can this stop?
Exactly. I think it's what we can see that there are different ways of having sex, and what I think, I mean, we can see this period as a bad period. I mean, there's so much limitations, but at the same time, it can also be an opportunity to reinvent your sexuality and to discover, okay, what about this virtual sex and these remote sex toys, and about masturbating together and talking and giving massages and all these things. I mean, I would be sort of in favor of integrating and broadening our definition, and not focusing only on, okay, we kiss and then we have foreplay and then we have
Yeah.
oral sex and penetration, but see, okay, what's out there. So it can be an opportunity to broaden. But I do agree with you, the idea that, okay, it's kind of a supplement, it's kind of an addition. It sort of
Yeah.
broadens your sexual repertoire, but it can never replace the fact that
Exactly.
people still want
The
to
human
have this part
connection,
of
Yeah.
touching and kissing and oral sex and genital penetration and all these. Yeah.
So it's really difficult in that sense.
Then let's see, okay, how can we still have sex then as singles in these times? And one of the options is indeed the sex buddy, to have like sex with somebody that you can trust, that you know limits social contact, that you know is also safe. I think that's would be one good thing. But obviously, yeah, then you still miss that dating idea of having sex with different people or exploring your sexuality. I think still it's important to limit your sexual context, and maybe also one of the advices is also to be pragmatic in the sense of ask each other's phone number, so that there can be contact tracing if in case one is infected, or use clean sheets, wash your hands, make sure that you ventilate a room. That's also very important. I think also one of the ideas is that when you have sex or oral sex, that you use a condom, or that you use something to cover the clitoris, because then there's no saliva contact. That's also one of the ways not to transfer.
Yeah.
Or no kissing, although that's
That one is very
that's a very
wild.
difficult one.
Yeah.
Or that you use a mouth mask. That's also one of the things
That's
that
extremely wild.
it's I can imagine that it's maybe some fetishism could be created there,
Like a dog mask.
that you get sort of aroused of this mouth mask, or you make it a very sexy one. But it is a very safe way to have sex. Let's be honest, that's if you really want to stick by the rules.
Yeah.
I mean, applying the general corona rules to sex makes total sense. Then again, you need to see how pragmatic it is again, because if you make it too mechanical, like, okay, I need to ventilate now for 20 minutes, close the window, change the sheet, then it also takes away the like spontaneous,
Exactly.
funny side away from sex.
Yeah.
But of course, like having the number of your partner is a must.
Yeah. And I think also in a way, I mean, try to indeed find a balance between wanting sex, having sex, and at the same time protecting yourself and protecting the society. I think that's important.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering also, because when we look at the numbers, the data, especially when we go to the first lockdown and we look at the first research data, we actually saw a decrease in sexual behavior in singles, and also in using dating apps and online dating and sexting. So all the advices that the government was actually giving, like use this sexting and online dating and via do the virtual sex, people were actually not using it as long as at least what we saw in the data. And you also said it a little bit in the beginning, that in the beginning of the first lockdown, you were really strict following the rules because you were kind of scared and you didn't but then it changed. So probably we'll have a difference when we look at the data for the second lockdown and the first lockdown.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Also, a thing that it made me think now, like I was really asking myself, why is that the data is showing us that trend? I like looking at my friends and even at myself, I feel like this year, since COVID started, has been a year of self-discovery, not only in the sexual realm, but also like, what do we want from like from this life actually? Like, are we living the life that we envisioned, you know, since forever? Is this life serving us any purpose or something like that? And so, at least for me, I did have a little break from sexual interactions, but it was more to focus on myself and my well-being. Like, these are so like stressful times.
Yeah.
It's normal to sometimes take a step back and like reevaluate yourself, get in touch with yourself, meditate, eat good food, some yoga, you know, and then connect with other people when you feel more ready.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people put on the pause knob and just sort of escape from the rat race. I think that's one
So
of the
much,
that could be one explanation. Another explanation could also be that this kind of reporting bias, that in the first lockdown people just didn't dare to say that they were still dating or having sex, because let's face it, there are some people who follow the rules very strictly and there are some people who are not, and I sometimes feels as if the people who follow the rules are judgmental and are kind of judging the ones who do not follow the rules. So it could be that there's kind of a stigma, right?
That's true for sure. For example, when I meet up with people, I'm hesitant with telling my friends, which is also important because if you meet up with strangers, someone at least should know where you are, and it could create a dangerous situation too. But Bear's point was also really true, because the overall theme of the first lockdown was really self-discovery. I don't know a single person who didn't try to find a new hobby during the first lockdown.
true.
Everyone. I mean, I tried to play the guitar, started drawing. Obviously, I stopped after a month, but even I deleted every app I had, like no contact. It helped. Also, a lot of people went to their families in the first lockdown, I feel like, because they didn't know how long it will take. They were like, okay, it's just a month, so I just quarantine with my parents, and then everything is fine. And then obviously you have less sex because you can't invite anyone over. And it's harder to go to other people's places.
Yeah, there could be different, indeed, explanations to see how this drop in sexual behavior. It's about following the rules. It's also maybe in the beginning, if you're anxious about what's happening, what is that you're sort of less inclined to have sex because you're less motivated. Maybe it's not on top of your head. And then you see that indeed there's also this rules, and you don't dare to talk about it. It can create division between friends. But I think that at a certain point, it's like you said, these rules were okay for 1 or 2 months, and that's probably also what we all expected. But when being in this situation for longer, it's now more than 1 year, and it's probably going to be longer, let's say, before everything goes back to normal. So
but just like you said, like you pointed out this judgment thing, we see it with gender, for example, how the social media can be, for example, a platform to judge and show how people are not complying with their gender, for example, you know, like it's a platform for hate sometimes. And I noticed also, like during COVID, a lot of my friends were sharing these articles like, these people were having dinner, 5 people having dinner, not respecting the COVID rules, and everyone was just insulting, like, these people don't care about human lives, they are selfish, everyone was like, meeting up is selfish. There's just so much hate towards those who are not complying 100% to like the regulations, that I totally agree with you. There's like this fear of judgment. Are they gonna think that I'm selfish, that I don't give a single
but that's
F?
a little bit the thing. What we clearly see here is what I noticed in the beginning, this paradox between collective health and individual health. It's like, what do I need to remain mentally sane and to remain like sexually healthy? And at the same time, I'm worried about collective health, and it's kind of this finding this balance between them. It's about enjoying sex because you need it, and at the same time protecting yourself and protecting each other and protecting society, and that's a little bit the challenge we're facing.
It's extremely hard knowing that we live in a society that constantly tells us to care for the collective well-being to the extent of sometimes neglecting that individual well-being. And we see like that in sexual health, but also in other forms of health, you know, like we are constantly, even with university, we are studying for what? To be productive members of a society, the collective, all the time the collective. But what about us? Like,
I think indeed we should sort of focus more on how we can sort of, I think, there is more awareness about the importance of mental health and sexual health. And I think that's also one of the good things of this COVID situation, that we feel that there is more than only your body, and it's also about how you feel. And it's also been a very challenging experiment, like how do people react in these different, and we see that people react differently. I mean, there are also people who thrive in this situation and who actually like this pause and this, I don't need to be social, I don't need to have sex. Maybe for some people who are sexually anxious, yeah, this is actually, I don't need to, there's no obligation anymore, and they actually feel better. So
Yeah.
we don't know whether it's
Yeah.
like, if everyone is suffering as much as we are. But I think that's important to always keep in mind that there are many individual differences in how people react to
For
this
sure.
situation, and whether you follow the rules or not. I think it's really important indeed not to be judgmental, because if people do not strictly follow the rules, there are reasons for it. And I think but at the same time, we do need to make sure that, I mean, you cannot simply do whatever you want in these
Exactly.
times. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what it is. And you need to think a little bit more and try to protect.
Yeah. But instead
Being-
of judging, sorry,
No,
but
it's-
instead of judging, we can just then, assume the best, like each person knows what's best for them, just like we know and we are following the rules in our own way. Another person is too. So yeah, it's very important to not be judgmental and just have this compassion
Yeah.
towards the other. We're all in this together.
Yeah, you could say understanding, but also informing. And I hear some things like you say, like, hey, when I go to my parents or when I visit people who may be more vulnerable, then you quarantine yourself and you say,
Yeah.
I make sure that I don't have any contact with friends, or at least no sexual contacts 1 or 2 weeks before. I think that's also one of the being pragmatic rules to protect each other, and I think to
Yeah.
deal with this situation.
To some extent, I feel like that people being judgmental helps, though. I mean, of course, judgment is never good, especially when it comes to sex, because it's stigmatized already. But for example, when it comes to the masks, in the beginning, no one wore them.
Yeah.
And after a while, it was like a social pressure thing, and people felt judged if they went shopping without a mask. And I feel like I will wear the mask even after Corona, because it makes sense if I'm going shopping that I don't sneeze all over the fruits,
Yeah.
for example. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So in that sense, I feel like it helped implementing the rules.
Yeah, so that you have this social control, this social pressure can sort of
Exactly.
have an effect, because otherwise you would sort of tend to forget and only think about
Yeah.
what I need. And seeing the mask and seeing people talking about the rules can also help you to remember, okay, this is like the
Exactly.
overall goal we're doing this for.
Yeah.
We are protecting our society.
But
But
of
it
course,
just-
you can overdo it. Like,
Yeah.
as you said, like if you like, okay, no, I'm quarantining all day, I'm at home all the time, and you have to do it too, then that goes too far, obviously.
Yeah.
Of course, but it's very interesting. There was this case in Brussels. I don't know if you've heard with this politician from Hungary,
Yeah.
who is the one passing the regulations for COVID. Don't do this, do that. Magically, it was found in a situation with like more than 7 people in a very sexually heated interaction, let's just say, with multiple people, if you know what I mean. And I just thought it was a bit ironic. He's the
Yeah.
one, signing these laws not only against homosexuals, but also for the
Yeah.
COVID measures. And we find them in those two situations that he so much despises, apparently.
But that's also maybe a little bit also our focus. I mean, nobody is perfect, and obviously everyone is. But let's say that we are really much focused, because especially when it comes
Yeah.
from people who are giving these rules, it's like, yeah, but you have to stick to.
But it
stick
makes me
by-
wonder then, if those same people who created and like established these regulations say that would be the best, and not even them are able to follow
Yeah.
those rules,
And they
aren't we
should
going
know,
too far?
yeah. Yeah, I think that also. But I truly believe that one of the main problems with these rules were that everyone expected it would be 1 or 2, 3 months, and I
Yeah.
think that's a little bit the thing. I think,
Yeah.
to be honest, that everyone knows that. Also, the government knows that this is just not feasible anymore for 1 or 2 years. You cannot simply say, well, just masturbate. Okay, you can masturbate for one month or 2 months, but obviously it can never replace having sex with a partner.
Yeah.
So I think that's also one of the things. Nobody expected it to last so long, and I think, and it's also about very much, this tension. On the one hand, I mean, you understand the needs for sexuality, but at the same time, you also want to protect our society, because if we let go and you can do whatever you want, maybe we are here for 3-4 years in this situation. And so
Yeah,
I
of
think it's
course.
also a matter of protecting each other, and I think that's also a little bit the thing, is trying to find a way to sort of inform people how to do it the best way, and then see what works for you, and make sure that you kind of protect yourself against that. And I think that's one of the things. It's how to deal with it now, and we already talked a little bit about what will be next, because I think that's also one concern. It's about our sexual development and our sexual curiosity and everything that is kind of on hold now and paused. There's like, okay, you can have sexting and virtual sex or some, and what about like people who never had sex? And then you will not suddenly do it via virtual sex.
Yeah,
so it's really paused for them. What about also dating? It's also like, how do you meet people? It's done via online dating. I think that also has some implications, because normally you go to a bar and you meet somebody and you talk a little bit, and by experience you learn what is my type, what are the people that I like. And now with this online dating, if you don't have social context, you need to predefine your type. You need to know beforehand. You swipe, and based on the profiles you have to decide, what do I like and what do I don't like. And that's a little bit challenging, because you have no experience, especially like the young adolescents. They have no experience, but they need to know what they want. So that's also a challenge. How will this affect our dating behavior?
Also, the problem is, I'm afraid that the next generation won't learn the respect of the person in that way, because I feel like there's a trend of people seeing others as objects in that sense. Like, I'm dating, and dating is having sex right now, and they're not talking anymore.
Exactly.
Like, I'm afraid that they won't experience this. Okay, we go on 5 dates and then we have sex. Or I mean, there's nothing wrong with having hookups, of course, but
yeah, exactly. It's a completely different, and that's the thing. If you have this balance of, you can use the online dating apps, but if you still have the social context in the gym, and then you meet people, and then you sort of have this regular dating phase. But if you do it only online and there's no social contact, and then you also have to think like, do we have a walk, and how, and there's so much analytic thinking. So it clearly will have an effect on how people will approach relationships and approach sexual relationships. And I think it would be good to reflect on that a little bit more. So I think in the next podcast, we will talk about this online dating and sexting and all these new media tools, and how this can affect our sexuality, also apart from Corona. And because these things will be there, and this new technology is there, and it's also like, how can we use it in a positive way, because it's evolving, and it's important to reflect on that.
One thing is certain, I feel like we seeing this, it's a big change, which it is, but looking back at the history of like how we perceive sex and like sexualities, even in the identities and everything, we see that it's constantly changing, like, and it changes across cultures. For example, the tomboys in West Sumatra, like they think completely different from this Western mentality around sex. So whatever is happening, there will be like some reinventation, around sex, but it will, like, I don't feel like maybe the one we have now is the best, because that's how we always feel, and it always changes.
It always changes. And I think that also, like, I really believe in this idea of never waste a good crisis. And I think that we have some challenges now, and we're facing things, but it's also about what can we learn from this, and what can we sort of, that we know, where we raise awareness about how can we change our sexual development or school-based sex education. What are the things we need to focus on more, because what we have learned now will make us richer for the future. So I really believe that. So I want to thank you. I think it was a nice talk, a nice conversation.
So nice.
I
really
think
enjoyed
we covered a lot of topics, and I hope that, especially also for the people listening, that you learned a little bit more. We tried to inform you about how you can be single in these times, how you can sort of follow the rules, and at the same time also be pragmatic and ensure your sexual health. Because despite all these regulations, there's still an opportunity to enjoy sexuality, because that should be still the primary aim of having sex. Thank you for listening.
thank you.